10 infamous murderers that shocked New York State. In the shadows of New York's gleaming skyscrapers and bustling streets lurk stories of the most chilling kind. Meet the 10 sinister souls who turned the Empire State into their haunting ground, leaving behind a trail of fear that echoes through the alleys and across the decades. These killers etch their names deep, spilling blood across decades. A towering brute with ice in his veins, a nurse hiding death in her touch, a radical sparking chaos, a wanderer with a blade and a hunger. Their marks linger, smeared like fog that won't lift off the Hudson, a dread that seeps into the cracks. We're stepping into their world, tracing the weight of their steps, the cold snap of their presence. This isn't just about who they killed, it's the shiver they left, the way they turned trust into a trap. 10 lives twisted into something monstrous. 10 warnings scratched out in the dirt of New York's hard ground. Evil doesn't march in loud. It slinks, it grins, it waits. Let's start where the shadows thickened, where the first drop fell. Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman's cold wrath. Richard Kuklinski, known as the Iceman, loomed over the New York crime scene as a chilling figure, both literally and figuratively. A mountain of a man whose stare was as sharp as the winter wind, he initiated his life of crime at the tender age of 13. His first known act of violence occurred in a grimy alley in Jersey City in 1949, where a quick spat with a peer named Charlie Lane turned deadly. Kuklinski seized a chunk of wood, striking Lane until he lay lifeless, his youthful indiscretion permanently silenced. The brutality did not stop there. He mutilated Lane's body, a prelude to the cold-hearted killer he would become. Born in 1935 into a home marred by abuse and emotional distance, Kuklinski's childhood was steeped in violence. These early experiences in a harsh environment shaped him into a formidable figure that even New York's hardened underworld learned to fear. From the 1940s to his final arrest in 1986, Kuklinski claimed to have ended over 100 lives, each victim a notch on his proverbial belt. Though this figure remains part of the Iceman's mythos, Kuklinski's methods were gruesomely varied and efficient. He utilized whatever tools were available: guns, knives, poisons. Notably, he was known to freeze the bodies of some victims, obscuring the time and cause of death and earning him his icy moniker. His lack of hesitation, whether dispatching a target under the glaring sun on Brooklyn's pavements or offering a poisoned drink to those who crossed him, spoke of a man for whom murder was merely business. One particularly macabre tactic involved tying a victim in a warehouse, releasing hungry rats, and filming the ensuing horror to satisfy mob clients. Kuklinski's diverse methods reflected his adaptability and the cold, calculating mind that drove his long career in murder. Despite his monstrous deeds, Kuklinski maintained a veneer of normalcy that was as unnerving as his crimes. He was a family man who could be seen taking his children to Sunday services, and rarely, if ever, showing the darkness that lay beneath to those in his personal life. This duality kept him shielded from suspicion within his community, making his eventual capture in 1986 all the more shocking. Law enforcement finally apprehended him through an undercover operation, bringing an end to his decades-long reign of terror. In the courtroom and beyond, Kuklinski gained a legendary status, partly fed by his own narratives and the media's fascination with his cold-hearted efficiency. His tales of disposing bodies and his stoic demeanor during trials captivated public imagination, but also elicited fear and revulsion. He passed away in 2006 in a prison cell, his health deteriorating as steadily as his infamy persisted in public memory. In diners and dark corners where whispers of his deeds linger, Kuklinski is often spoken of not just as a man, but as an enigmatic force, a storm of violence that had once swept through New York, leaving a trail of bodies and a legacy mired in blood. Kuklinski's story is a stark reminder of the dual lives that some individuals manage to lead. His ability to inflict terror and evade capture for many years challenges our understanding of justice and morality. It compels society to grapple with the uncomfortable reality that sometimes the most dangerous predators are hidden in plain sight, masked by the mundane and profane. His life forces us to question not only the nature of evil, but also the systems in place to protect us from it, serving as a grim lesson on the human capacity for violence and deception. Now we turn to a different kind of terror, one that crept through the boroughs with a smile and a whisper. Albert Fish, the Gray Man's Hunger. Albert Fish, known as the Gray Man, haunted New York streets with a presence that belied his sinister nature. To the untrained eye, he was just another forgettable old man with gray hair and slumped shoulders, moving unnoticed through the busy sidewalks of New York. However, his true character was chillingly revealed on a day in 1928 when he appeared at the Budd family's doorstep in Manhattan, posing as a man named Frank Howard. He was there to answer a job ad, but his intentions were far darker. With a deceitful story, he lured away their daughter, Grace, under the pretense of attending a party. Tragically, she was never seen alive again. In a dilapidated shack in Westchester, Fish's horrific actions culminated with the murder of Grace. He dismembered her body with chilling precision and later confessed to deriving pleasure from his gruesome acts. Fish, a figure of haunting infamy, stalked his victims from the 1920s to 1934, leaving a trail of broken lives in his wake. Fish was born in 1870 in Washington, D.C., and experienced a brutal upbringing that left indelible marks on him. After moving to New York and facing personal and financial hardships, his suppressed pain manifested in the most horrific ways. He turned into a predator who not only killed but also tormented his victims, employing methods that included sharp implements and spiked boards to inflict pain. His capture came after he sent a gruesomely detailed letter to Grace Budd's parents, boasting of his actions. This led the police directly to him in 1934. Found in a dingy rooming house, Fish displayed no resistance, admitting to multiple murders with a disturbing sense of pride. His trial in 1935 was a spectacle that ended with him being sentenced to death by electrocution. Even in his final moments, Fish's eerie composure and unsettling enthusiasm for his fate unnerved all who witnessed his end. Fish's methods were not just about killing, they were about causing prolonged suffering. His infamous case in 1927 involved the disappearance of a little boy named Billy Gaffney, whom Fish later claimed to have savagely killed and cannibalized. This pattern repeated with other children, leading many to regard him as one of the most monstrous individuals of his time. Even after his execution, the shadow of Albert Fish lingered over New York. His life and crimes raised unsettling questions about the nature of evil and the effectiveness of the justice system. Fish taught the city a brutal lesson, that monsters walk among us, often hidden behind the most unassuming facades. His legacy is a cautionary tale, urging society to remain vigilant and protective, especially of its most vulnerable. As New York moved forward, the echo of Fish's deeds remained, a dark reminder of the capacity for evil within the human soul. Now we drift from the streets to a place meant for healing, where a quiet killer wore a mask of care. Richard Angelo, the angel of death's silent poison. Richard Angelo, a seemingly gentle nurse at Good Samaritan Hospital on Long Island, betrayed the very essence of care in the late 1980s. Under the hum of hospital monitors and amidst the tired shuffle of healthcare routines, he manipulated a facade of healing to conduct his grim work. One fateful night in 1987, an elderly patient named John Stanley experienced the deadly reach of Angelo's deception firsthand. Angelo administered a lethal dose of Pavilon, a drug that paralyzes, and watched silently as Stanley struggled for life, only intervening to feign a rescue attempt. This act of false heroism was a pattern Angelo repeated, choosing victims too weak to fight back, their vulnerabilities making them easy targets for his macabre interventions. Born in 1956 and raised in a nondescript, stable household, Angelo was far from the image of a deranged criminal. His outward calm and professional demeanor concealed a deep-seated desire for recognition. This need drove him to create situations where he could appear as a savior, engineering near-death experiences for his patients to resolve, thus earning their gratitude and admiration. However, his scheme unraveled when a patient named Girolamo Kucic survived an encounter with Angelo's needle, managing to alert other staff. Testing of medical equipment soon led to the chilling discovery of Angelo's actions. Investigators found Angelo's apartment a trove of sinister keepsakes, vials of the drugs he used to incapacitate his victims. His arrest followed swiftly, and the subsequent trial in 1989 laid bare his dark double life. Angelo confessed, revealing that of the 37 patients he had dosed, 25 had not survived. The revelation shook the local community, challenging the sanctity of a space designed for healing and care. The impact of Angelo's crimes extended beyond the immediate horror of his actions, sending ripples through the small towns of Long Island. Hospitals, once havens of safety, now seemed like potential traps where a caregiver's smile might mask deadly intentions. In the wake of the scandal, hospital staff became hypervigilant, and patients and their families grappled with a new sense of vulnerability. Angelo, sentenced to 61 years in prison, became a ghostly figure of the past, yet the legacy of his betrayal lingered. Angelo's story is a cautionary tale about the potential darkness hidden within those sworn to heal. It highlights not only the individual capacity for evil, but also the systemic failures that allow such betrayal to unfold. His actions transformed hospital wards from places of refuge to zones of suspicion, undermining the trust between healthcare providers and their patients. Long Island's community bore the scar of Angelo's deceit, a reminder that the true face of evil might be hidden behind a calm exterior and a reassuring smile. In the end, Richard Angelo taught a harsh lesson. Evil does not always lurk in the shadows or wield overt threats. Sometimes it manifests quietly in the everyday interactions, wearing a mask of benevolence until it strikes, leaving a trail of sorrow in its wake. His case serves as a somber reflection on the vulnerability of trust and the depths to which human darkness can sink, even in the most unlikely places. Now we step into the sweltering streets of a city gripped by panic, where a lone gunman turns summer nights into a hunt. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam's deadly whisper. David Berkowitz lingered at the edge of a Bronx streetlight's glow on a sticky July night in 1976, his grip tight around a .44 Bulldog revolver, its weight a cold comfort. Across the way, Donna Loria's voice floated from a parked car, her laughter mixing with the city's hum, her friend Jody beside her, oblivious to the eyes tracking them. 5 shots cracked the air, glass splintering, and Donna went quiet, her life snuffed out at 18. Jody's cries cut through the haze as Berkowitz melted into the shadows. Born in 1953, handed off at birth, he grew up in a cramped adoptive home, a kid who never fit. Later, a postal worker drifting through days, his thoughts a tangle of noise and rage. Dubbed Son of Sam, he tore through New York from 76 to 77, a phantom leaving 6 dead, 7 broken, and a city clutching its breath. He hunted with a brutal simplicity, picking out lovers or women with flowing hair, striking where the night felt soft, under dim lamps in empty lots. One slug ripped into Carl Denaro's head in Queens, leaving him breathing but marked. In Brooklyn, Stacy Moskowitz and Robert Violante leaned close, sharing a moment until bullets shattered it, her gone, him blind. Berkowitz toyed with the city, scribbling wild letters to cops and a newsman, ranting about a devil dog barking orders in his skull. "I'm the monster," he scrawled, each word a jab, each blast a jolt through the heat-soaked streets. 8 times he hit, a restless ghost, slipping through fingers like smoke. The city bent under him that summer. Disco beats faded, parks turned desolate, and folks kept their girls close, eyes darting at every rustle. The 77 heat pressed down, thick with sweat and dread. Cops scrambled, chasing whispers and blurry drawings. But he stayed a step ahead, a wraith in the sprawl. His luck ran dry in August, not from some grand takedown, but a slipped parking slip near his Yonkers hole. Someone spotted him prowling, and when they kicked in his door, there it was, the gun, scribbled maps, one last note, all laid out like a confession. Hauled in, he flashed a crooked smile, spinning tales of madness, but the judge didn't bite. 6 life sentences landed in 78, and he's still there, trading bullets for Bible verses, preaching to walls that don't care. Berkowitz was a raw wound in New York side, not a planner or a hustler, just a storm, wild and mean, kicking a city already stumbling through dark days and power cuts. He made fear a living thing, sharp and close. Cars weren't safe havens anymore. Strangers weren't just strangers. People walked different, heads low, seeing threats in every corner shadow. He didn't just kill, he ripped the city's ease away, left it jumpy at every late-night sound. Son of Sam turned streets into a maze where danger crouched, waiting. Before the gun, he was a nobody, awkward, drifting, swallowing anger from a childhood that never settled right. The Bronx raised him rough, its noise seeping into him, twisting until it spilled out in blood. That summer, he owned New York, not with power, but with panic. A name hissed in bars and whispered on stoops. Even now, locked away, he lingers, a creak in the floorboards, a chill when the lights flicker. The city patched itself up, kept rolling, but his mark stuck, a scratch in the concrete. He showed how fast normal could turn deadly, how a lone figure could make a million souls flinch at the dark. Now we move to a small town where a mother's tears hid a deadly secret, cloaked in the silence of a nursery. Mary Beth Tinning, the smothering mother's veil. Mary Beth Tinning held her first baby, Jennifer, close in a Schenectady hospital room in 1971. Her eyes red from tears as the tiny girl faded after barely a week. The staff murmured about illness, a sorrowful twist of fate, but that moment cracked open a door to something darker. Over the next 14 years, death shadowed her house, a plain, working-class place with peeling paint and a sagging porch. One by one, her kids slipped away, 9 in all, their names a roll call of loss etched into her story. The last one, Tammy Lynn, went still in 1985. A 4-month-old bundle found cold in her crib, her mother's wails ringing through the walls. This time, the doctors didn't buy the grief act. Tests showed smothering, and the mask fell. Born in 1942, raised in a family scraping by, Mary Beth wasn't the broken parent she played. She was something colder, a figure who turned a mother's care into a quiet, deadly grip, haunting her town from the early 70s to the mid-80s. Her hands worked in silence, gentle but cruel, pressing life out of her children with a pillow or a palm held too long. She spaced it out, letting months or years pass, dressing each loss in a shroud of mystery, sickness, bad luck, anything but the truth. She'd carry them to the emergency room, hair mussed, voice trembling, a picture of despair that fooled almost everyone. Friends dropped off food, patted her shoulder, while she buried her babies in a nearby plot, their headstones sprouting like weeds. Cops started squinting at her after a few, their notepads filling with questions, but she danced around them, slippery as fog. It wasn't until Tammy Lynn's death that the net tightened. Grilled in a stark room, she let slip a hollow confession, blaming the noise of their cries for 3 of the killings. Whispers grew that she'd done them all, a slow erasure fueled by something twisted deep inside her. Schenectady turned into a ghost of itself. Kids once ran free on those neat little streets, but now curtains twitched and parents hovered closer. People who'd waved at Mary Beth over the fence started crossing the road to avoid her gaze, their trust in the everyday fraying. Her husband Joe stuck around, a man either too loyal or too lost to face what brewed under his roof. Talk of a jinxed bloodline faded into something uglier. Neighbors swapped theories over coffee, voices low, wondering what kind of person could do this. When she stood in court in 1987, after her arrest the year before, the room felt heavy. Here was this slight woman, pale as a sheet, muttering about being worn out, pinned only for Tammy Lynn's end. She got 2 decades, walked out in 2018, old and faded, leaving the rest of her story a knot no one could untie. What stuck about Mary Beth was how soft her horror felt. No loud chaos, no flashing steel, just a cradle rocked into a grave. She made the familiar feel wrong, turned the hum of a lullaby into a warning bell. Around Albany's edges, folks started second-guessing the warmth of a mother's hug, the safety of their own 4 walls. Her shadow stretched beyond the courtroom, a quiet chill that settled into the bones of the place. She wasn't loud or wild. She was the terror next door, the kind that shares your bread and then empties your house. New York's small towns carry her weight still, a lesson that the worst threats don't always shout. They murmur, they linger, they wait. Now we shift to a highway where ideals turn to gunfire, and a woman's silence became a death sentence. Kathy Boudin, the radicals' deadly ambush. Kathy Boudin gripped the steering wheel of a U-Haul truck, parked just off a quiet road near Nyack, New York, on a crisp October day in 1981. Her knuckles whitened, but her face stayed still, a mask of control as chaos brewed behind her. 6 men bristling with guns in desperation had just hit a Brinks armored car, their heist leaving a guard sprawled lifeless in a pool of his own blood. They scrambled into the back, the truck sagging under their weight, and she eased it forward, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, where red and blue lights flared. 2 cops approached, their boots crunching gravel, hands on holsters, expecting a routine stop. Boudin climbed out, palms up, her presence disarming. Some swore she murmured for peace, others saw only a blank stare. Then the doors flew open, and the air split with gunfire. A storm of bullets cutting the officers down where they stood, their bodies crumpling into the dirt. Born into privilege in 1943, raised among Manhattan's elite, Boudin had veered from a life of comfort into a world of bombs and rebellion. A radical whose shadow fell heavy that day. She didn't fire a shot, but her part was carved in stone. She'd known the score: drive the truck, play the decoy, let the trap snap shut. Years before, she'd danced with death in a different game. Mixing explosives in a downtown hideout meant to shred soldiers far from home. That plan blew apart early, the blast rocking the city and sending her underground, a ghost for a decade until she rolled back into the light behind that wheel. The robbery wasn't random. It pulsed with the anger of a cause, a violent grab for cash to fuel a fight she'd long embraced. When the shooting stopped, 2 more badges ran into the fray, too late to change the outcome. Boudin bolted, feet pounding pavement, but the law snagged her quickly, the others scattering like ash, some falling under return fire. She stood in a courtroom years later, her fate hinging on a deal, 2 decades locked away, a sentence that ended in 2003 when she stepped out, quieter, her fire dimmed into books and lectures. Upstate felt the blow like a punch. Nyack, a dot on the map where folks nodded to neighbors, turned into a war zone that afternoon, the kind of place where kids played carefree until that moment. The dead left families hollow, their grief a keening wail that hung over the trees. Boudin's name split people. Some saw a dreamer caught in the gears, others a cold-blooded link in a chain of carnage. Doors bolted shut that night, eyes peered through curtains, and trust frayed in a town that once felt safe. Her past, that near miss with a bomb years back, had rattled the island of Manhattan. This bloodbath branded her deeper into the state's rough edges. She served her time, walked free, but the echoes didn't fade. Those lost stayed lost, their absence a weight that wouldn't lift. What made Boudin stick wasn't madness or a lone wolf's howl. It was her choice to stand at the edge of violence and let it unfold. She didn't need to hold the gun. Her stillness pulled the strings just the same. Across New York, her story rippled through tense marches and shouted slogans, a nagging worry that belief could twist into something sharp and deadly. She wasn't the loudest killer, not the wildest, but her quiet part in that brutal day left a mark, a lesson scratched into the earth that danger can wear conviction like a cloak, waiting for the right second to shed it and strike. Now we will shift to the next one, Joel Rifkin, The Suburban Shadow. In the quiet sprawl of Long Island suburbs, where families nestled into seemingly peaceful lives, Joel Rifkin moved like a specter, his presence hardly noticed but deeply felt. Active from 1989 to 1993, Rifkin's method was brutally methodical. He targeted women, many of whom were struggling with the vulnerabilities that come from living on society's margins. His victims, mostly prostitutes, found themselves ensnared by a man who wore the mundane mask of an everyday citizen. Rifkin's reign of terror unraveled the fabric of safety thread by thread as he strangled these women, their lives extinguished in the throes of his quiet rage. The final act of his cruelty was perhaps the most chilling, dismembering their bodies and scattering their remains across the state, turning familiar landscapes into graveyards of sorrow. Each site where he disposed of a body became a stark, haunting reminder of the darkness skulking in suburbia's shadows. His capture in 1993 was as mundane as the life he outwardly portrayed. A routine traffic stop escalated into a nightmarish discovery when police found a corpse in his truck. This grisly find led to his confession of 17 murders, each recounting chilling in its dispassionate detail, revealing the depth of his savagery. Rifkin's story is a grim parable of the dual lives that some can lead. His quiet demeanor and unremarkable appearance belied a savage obsession with control and destruction. He exploited the anonymity afforded by the suburban sprawl to carry out his macabre impulses, leaving a trail of fear that lingered long after his arrest. His actions force a reflection on the overlooked spaces and faces that blend into the backdrop of daily life, prompting a deeper consideration of what evils might be hiding in plain sight. Now let's move on to the next one. Arthur Shawcross, the Genesee River Killer. Arthur Shawcross, dubbed the Genesee River Killer, represents a haunting chapter in New York's criminal history, marked by a horrifying cycle of release and relapse. His criminal journey began tragically in Watertown in the early 1970s, with the murders of 2 children, a crime so heinous it left an indelible scar on the community. Yet it was his actions after parole that cast a longer, darker shadow over the state. Released from prison in the mid-1880s due to a controversial decision by the justice system, Shawcross moved to Rochester, where he soon returned to his murderous ways. Between 1988 and 1990, he killed 11 women, targeting those often overlooked by society, prostitutes. He disposed of their bodies along the scenic waterways of the Genesee River, turning these natural landscapes into sites of terror and sorrow. Each victim was left as a grim testament to his unchecked brutality and the failings of a parole system that did not prevent his return to violence. Shawcross's methods were brutal and personal, and his choice of victims reflected a deeply ingrained disdain for women who he perceived as vulnerable. The community reeled with each discovery of a new victim, the natural beauty of the riverbanks forever marred by the memory of his cruelty. His eventual arrest in 1990 brought relief, but also a wave of questions about how society and the justice system deal with individuals capable of such repeat offenses. The narrative of Arthur Shawcross is more than a simple recount of crimes. It's a complex saga of systemic failures, personal evil, and the scars left on a community. His death in prison in 2008 ended his life but did little to heal the wounds he inflicted on the city of Rochester and its inhabitants, who continue to struggle with the legacy of his actions. This story challenges us to reflect on the balance of justice, rehabilitation, and the protection of society from those who show a profound capacity for repeated violence. Now let us turn our focus to Leon Czolgosz, an anarchist whose act of violence at the dawn of the 20th century sparked a wave of unease across New York and beyond. Leon Czolgosz, the anarchist's fatal bullet. Leon Czolgosz's act of assassinating President William McKinley in 1901 at the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo is a moment of historical infamy that shook not just New York, but the entire United States. His actions were driven by a radical anarchist belief that sought to challenge the fabric of American society. Czolgosz, a son of Polish immigrants, embraced the extremes of political dissent, believing his actions could spark a significant change against a power structure he vehemently opposed. On that critical day, disguised by the normalcy of a handshake and hiding his weapon in a handkerchief, Czolgosz shot McKinley, sending shockwaves through the nation's sense of security and stability. The incident stirred a nationwide tightening of security and a profound sense of vulnerability that lingered long after the assassination. The swift execution of Czolgosz at Auburn Prison, just weeks following the assassination, was a somber affair that reflected the nation's rattled nerves and the serious implications of his actions. His death did little to ease the unease that had gripped the public, prompting a national reflection on the limits of freedom and dissent in a democracy. Today, Czolgosz is remembered not merely as a lone assassin, but as a stark example of how extreme political beliefs can lead to monumental, albeit tragic, actions. His life and deeds compel us to consider the dangerous potential of radical ideologies when taken to their extremes. His story serves as a chilling reminder, continually studied and debated, of the deep impacts that such acts of violence have on society and history. This reflection on Czolgosz's life offers a critical examination of the intersections between personal convictions and their broader social repercussions, marking it as a pivotal moment in American political history. Now let's dive into the last one. Mark David Chapman, the echo of a fatal obsession. Mark David Chapman's transformation from an avid Beatles fan to the assassin of John Lennon on December 8, 1980, remains a somber episode in cultural history. The fatal incident outside the Dakota in Manhattan not only devastated New York, but also resonated globally, profoundly impacting those who admired Lennon as an emblem of peace and musical innovation. Originally an ardent admirer, Chapman's obsession with Lennon warped into a destructive force. Armed with a .38 caliber revolver and driven by a misguided desire for notoriety, he lay in wait outside Lennon's residence, a place typically buzzing with fans' hopeful murmurs. The 4 shots he fired disrupted the tranquility Lennon had fostered, marking a violent breach of the public's sense of security. As Lennon succumbed to his injuries, Chapman remained disturbingly composed at the scene, clutching a copy of The Catcher in the Rye, which he claimed justified his actions. His arrest was not the dramatic confrontation of a fugitive, but the subdued capture of a man resigned to his fate, fully aware of the severity of his deed. Now serving a life sentence, Chapman's imprisonment underscores the perilous crossroads of intense celebrity admiration and extreme personal delusions. Chapman's deed is a dark reflection on unmet desires and warped perceptions, highlighting the volatile mix of personal disillusionment and the intense idolization prevalent in celebrity culture. His actions prompt a critical examination of how societal glorification of celebrities can be dangerously misconstrued by those struggling with their mental health. The site of Lennon's murder has evolved into a place of reflection, not only to honor his memory, but also to meditate on the grim reality of fanaticism shadowing fame. Conclusion: New York's past is marked by the deeds of its darkest figures, murderers whose actions scarred both the city streets and its collective psyche. Their legacies linger, from the cold brutality of a mob hitman to the sinister acts of a child predator, the quiet deceit of a caregiver, the explosive anger of a lone gunman, the stealthy cruelty of a mother, and the chilling resolve of a revolutionary. They transformed ordinary places into scenes of nightmares, each with a unique method, yet all instilling a common fear. Danger is much closer than it appears. Some of these figures are imprisoned, others have passed away, but the echoes of their deeds remain, palpable in the whispering winds along the Genesee or the dense mists over the Hudson. The city continues its relentless pace, lights bright and horns loud, in an attempt to leave these shadows behind. Yet these memories persist, deep and disturbing, reminders of broken trust and the fragility of safety. Evil doesn't disappear. It merely waits, hidden in plain sight, for the darkness to return. If you're captivated by the darker facets of New York's history and enjoy unraveling mysteries, click the subscribe button. Join us for more engaging explorations into true crime stories. Don't miss our weekly updates packed with